Rachel Zegler was supposed to be Disney's next Golden Girl handpicked by none other than Steven Spielberg to star in West Side Story, and then crowned as the face of Disney's live-action Snow White reboot. Her career was fast-tracked in a way most young actresses could only dream of.
I sat through the whole thing. This was really bad. It was extremely leftist on every political dimension: racial politics, sexual politics, class politics, regime politics. Its narrative was cowardly. It was just awful.
For remaking the movie, they just got rid of the dwarfs, but they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures. You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group. You just erase that whole.
This is just so typical of the left. The progressives always finding a way to find their way back to doing something not progressive.
Have they ever thought about maybe like a little bit of like, I don't know, vulnerability study, opposition research, that sort of thing before you go and hire some Zoomer who's a lunatic?
But here's the thing: talent might get you in the door, but attitude will get you kicked right back out. What started as a fairy tale rise has now completely unraveled into one of the most chaotic downfalls Hollywood's seen in years. Behind the glamour and red carpets, insiders are painting a much darker picture. Glare, one filled with ego and entitlement, and a trail of bad blood left on every set she's touched.
Controversy in Snow White. The dwarves have been eliminated in the live action.
Yeah.
Now it's Snow White and the 7 magical beings.
Wait, it's 7 and the magical beings?
Yeah,
Like, they won't even
7
say,
magical
and the 7
beings.
dwarves?
No, because they're not dwarves. For right now, that's the only jobs that are there.
Doing catastrophically. They spent $300 million, and it currently has a 2.2 out of 10 rating on IMDb.
The movie has a major identity crisis.
Rachel Zegler, like so many kids raised on TikTok, she's all for infantada is the only global solution.
Allegations are now swirling that even Spielberg himself, the man who gave her that first big shot, was left so frustrated by her behavior on West Side Story that he privately vowed never to work with her again. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, they did. Disney's Snow White didn't just flop, it face planted at the box office, racking up losses so severe that the studio reportedly had to hit pause on other projects. At the center of it all, Rachel Zegler, the same actress who managed to alienate not just audiences.
Last week was a very big week, objectively a huge week. We had quite a few announcements. It's first live-action film, which is Snow White and the Evil Queen. And that's me. I'm Snow White, which is so funny.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie. She came out and she said, I apologize. Like, I went too far. But it wasn't.
But allegedly her own co-stars, crew members, and even studio executives. This is a story of how Rachel Zegler's Hollywood fairy tale turned into a full-blown nightmare, and how one of the greatest directors of all time may have been the first to sound the alarm. Let's start where the downfall allegedly began.
It's got extra musical numbers that are incredibly unnecessary that really add to that runtime. And let me go ahead and let you know that they're absolutely atrocious.
Nobody wants a movie about true love. What kind of woman do we want out there seeking true love, Eliana? It's the outrage.
Queen, playing the evil queen. It was pretty amazing.
They say all you have to do to make your wish come true is let it echo, 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 echo.
On the set of West Side Story, for most actors, landing a Spielberg project is a pinnacle of success, a chance to learn from a master and prove yourself to the world. But according to multiple whispers from inside production, Zegler didn't quite approach it that way.
It's awful, generic. Never mind that the lyrics make no sense at all. All you have to do to make your dream come true is let it echo. Is it like on a metaphor?
And you know the saying, go woke, get broke, and Disney's going to lose money on this movie. And I believe it only made less than $1 million.
They spent $170 million to make the thing, and it had the lowest opening, under $50 million, of any of these live-action Disney remakes that they've ever had.
Broke out with this news, and I'm very, very, very excited and looking forward.
Sources close to the film claim that Zegler quickly developed a reputation for being difficult to work with, especially when it came to taking direction. Spielberg reportedly had a clear vision for how the character of Maria should be portrayed, classic, heartfelt, true to the spirit of the original. But Zegler, she wasn't having it. She allegedly pushed back hard, wanting to reinterpret Maria through a modern lens.
Hardcore. They're petrified of some kind of backlash.
Now, I'm guessing that she's not married. I'm guessing that she doesn't have kids. The movie is a complete disaster, by the way.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
So apparently, according to them and according to the writers of Snow White, women can't even want to be in love anymore.
Arguing that the role needed to reflect contemporary ideas of empowerment and independence. Now, challenging a director isn't always a bad thing, but challenging Spielberg on his own film, that's a bold move. And according to insiders, it didn't go over well. The back and forth became so disruptive that some crew members described the set as tense and exhausting. Spielberg, known for his calm demeanor, so
she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
Pretending like Rachel Zegler is the first of them all when she looks like Lord Farquaad in the film.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird.
Part of the first, fairy tale ever told.
Disney deleted Someday My Prince Will Come and made a modernized feminist alternative.
Oh my God.
Was said to be visibly irritated during several key rehearsals. One source even claimed Spielberg quietly confided to colleagues that working with Zegler was one of the most frustrating experiences of his career, and while he remained professional in public praising the cast and crew during press tours, those close to production suggest that behind the scenes he was already done with her, but the friction on West Side Story was just beginning to reel. Disaster was still to come if the drama on set wasn't enough. Zegler's casting as Maria sparked an entirely different kind of controversy. While many celebrated the choice of a Latina actress for the iconic role, it didn't take long for questions to start swirling about Zegler's actual background. According to reports, some studio executives weren't fully convinced of her claims about her heritage and allegedly asked her to prove her Latina identity during the casting process. Let's be clear, Hollywood has a long history of mishandling representation, but what made the situation especially messy was how it all played out behind closed doors. Insiders say that repeated requests for Zegler to confirm her background led to serious tension between her and the studio. Allegedly, there were heated conversations about whether her casting would be seen as authentic or viewed as yet another example of Hollywood playing fast and loose with ethnic representation, and Zegler, instead of diffusing the situation with grace, she reportedly doubled down, turning the conflict into a public spectacle during interviews where she accused the studio of questioning her identity. Whether those accusations were justified or not, the end result was the same: more drama, more headlines, and even more eyes watching her every move. By the time West Side Story hit theaters, the behind-the-scenes noise had almost drowned out the film itself. But as rough as things were during that first chapter of Zegler's career, the real implosion was still on the horizon when Disney tapped Zegler to lead their Snow White reboot. It was supposed to be her redemption arc, a chance to brush off the West Side Story drama and cement herself as a true A-lister. Instead, it became the biggest disaster of her career. The numbers don't lie, with a bloated budget rumored to be between $240 and $270 million. Snow White needed to be a smash hit just to break even, but the movie barely limped past $194. $8 million globally, falling painfully short of expectations. And while Disney tried to spin the narrative blaming market conditions and shifting audience taste, most people weren't buying it. Industry insiders pointed fingers squarely at Zegler. And honestly, it's hard to argue with them. Before the film even hit theaters, Zegler's own mouth had already sabotaged the project. Her now infamous interview slamming the original Snow White as creepy and outdated were like pouring gasoline on a fire. Fans who grew up loving the 1937 classic weren't just turned off, they were downright furious. But it wasn't just her critiques of the story that caused problems. Zegler's condescending attitude in press junkets, where she laughed off the idea of romance and fairy tales and mocked the original storyline, made her seem completely out of touch with the audience she was supposed to be winning over. Instead of building hype, every new quote from Zegler became another nail in the coffin. And as if the public backlash wasn't enough, rumors began circulating that even Disney execs were blindsided by how badly the film was being received. According to some sources, internal discussions were happening long before the release about whether Zegler was the right face to lead the studio's next generation of princess films. Turns out she wasn't. But the damage from Snow White didn't just stop at poor box office numbers. It had ripple effects across the entire Disney live-action pipeline. And what happened next sent shockwaves through the industry. If there's one thing you don't do when starring in a remake of a beloved classic, it's trash the original. But that's exactly what Rachel Zegler did over and over again in multiple interviews leading up to the release of Snow White. Zegler couldn't seem to help herself. Instead of embracing the magic and nostalgia that made the 1937 film iconic, she doubled down on calling it weird, creepy. She mocked the idea of a prince saving the princess, sneering at the story line as if it were beneath her. One quote in particular became the rallying cry for angry Disney fans everywhere: she's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. It was supposed to be empowering, but for many fans it just came off as arrogant. Let's be real, people didn't show up for Snow White expecting a lecture on feminism. They showed up for the fairy tale they loved. Instead, they got an actress who openly disrespected the very project she was hired to lead. Memes exploded across social media. YouTube critics went absolutely feral, and TikTok wasn't far behind, with creators racking up millions of views dissecting every condescending word that came out of Zegler's mouth. The backlash was brutal and relentless, but the worst part, she didn't walk it back. She didn't apologize. If anything, she seemed to lean into the drama smiling smugly through the interviews as if she was somehow above the criticism. By the time the movie hit theaters, the damage was already done. Audiences had turned against her, and Snow White was already being labeled a disaster before the opening weekend even wrapped, and as we all know now, that label stuck. But if you thought this was just about bad PR, buckle up, because things were about to get even messier behind the scenes, as if trashing the original. Snow White wasn't enough. Zegler's off. Camerara drama managed to turn the set of the film into a powder keg of political tension. Rumors started swirling that the set was divided. Some crew members allegedly felt caught in the crossfire, with conversations off camera growing heated. Anytime politics entered the room publicly, the studio tried to play it cool. They kept the cast apart as much as possible during interviews, carefully scripting joint appearances and avoiding any chance of the two leading ladies going off the rails. But behind the scenes, word was that things got so uncomfortable that certain scenes had to be reshot or avoided altogether to keep the peace. Marketing teams were reportedly scrambling to figure out how to promote the film without letting the political divide blow up the press tour. And let's not forget, the press still caught on headlines about the icy dynamic between Zegler and Ghetto started popping up well before the movie even premiered. It was just one more disaster, stacked on top of an already crumbling production. But the real fallout wouldn't just hit Snow White, it would end up shaking Disney to its core. Rachel Zegler walked into Hollywood with the world at her feet, Spielberg at her back, Disney rolling out the red carpet, a career path paved in gold. And yet here we are watching one of the fastest downfalls in recent memory, from the alleged battles with Spielberg to the disastrous Snow White press tour and the ugly political tensions that blew up behind the scenes. Zegler has managed to turn dream opportunities into cautionary tales. The biggest studios in the game trusted her with their most treasured IPs, and she spit in the face of both the projects and the fans who were supposed to champion her. The lesson here: Hollywood doesn't hand out second chances. Just because you're talented, it doesn't matter how many awards you've won or how many standing ovations you've had. When you burn bridges with the people writing your checks and the audience is buying the tickets, you're done, Rachel. Zegler's story isn't just about one flop movie, it's about what happens when ego outweighs gratitude, when controversy overshadows craft, and when the star of the show forgets that at the end of the day, the audience always has a final say, and right now that audience is left